Now, I am pleased to introduce our forum host, Dr. Tina Janamian, who is the CEO of the AgPal Group of Companies. Dr. Janamian has been a pivotal figure in integrating patient feedback in healthcare quality improvement and innovative care models. Her extensive experience in health service research and public health, combined with her leadership at Care Opinion Australia, underscores her commitment to enhancing patient care and outcomes through active consumer participation. Thank you very much for joining us today, and let's make it a productive and enlightening experience. We look forward to a session filled with insightful discussions and valuable learnings. Over to you, Tina.
Thanks very much, Rhonda and the Care Opinion team. A very warm welcome to you all from across Australia and the UK, and not sure whatever nations or continents are on the call this afternoon, but I suspect that our family in the Care Opinion teams will grow over time. So very warm welcome to you all. It's a pleasure to be facilitating and hosting this second Care Opinion online forum. I can see some familiar faces and some new ones, so thank you for taking the time to join this space and enrich our collective understanding and appreciation of consumer feedback. As we commence our forum today, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and waters throughout Australia on which our work takes place. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people of the Yagara nations, whose country the AgPal Group head office, including Care Opinion office, is based. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and I wish to acknowledge anyone online who identifies as an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander persons. Storytelling holds a special role in the culture and history of the First Nations people, serving not just as a means of entertainment, but as a vital method for passing down knowledge, cultural values, and the histories of communities throughout generations. And this deep-rooted tradition underscores the power of sharing stories to foster connection, understanding, and mutual respect. This tradition aligns really closely with the mission of Care Opinion, which is built on the foundation of sharing stories. At Care Opinion, we believe in the transformative power of these narratives to bring out change and improvement in healthcare by giving voice to those who use and experience it. Just as storytelling is essential in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures for education and preservation of history, at Care Opinion, it is central to improving care services and fostering dialogue between patients and providers. Let this be a reminder of the profound impact that storytelling can have and how by sharing our experiences, we can contribute to a legacy of improvement and understanding that benefits all. And the purpose of our forum today in the first session is to hear from leading experts and consumers around patient feedback or consumer engagement. We will gain some insights on research about the impact of patient feedback on frontline staff, why patient stories are the DNA of a healthcare system, staff engagement in the two-way feedback, what consumers want from a feedback framework, how Care Opinion can make a difference and why you should care about Care Opinion. And we will also have the bounty of hearing from consumers sharing their insights firsthand, how integrating patient-centred feedback into the health governance, who is the feedback system for, and sharing their own experience on influencing change within the health system. And in session 2, we will have a more of an informal, open kind of discussion aimed at informing the development of a co-designed patient-centred feedback governance framework and that will be hopefully utilised by health services or help inform health services in the way that they use relational feedback within their health service. So I look forward to lots of engagement, lots of great questions and discussion and contribution throughout the session that we have together, both session 1 and session 2. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. James Munro. It is a pleasure to have James join us again as our first international speaker for this forum. He's a familiar face for most. James is the CEO of Care Opinion UK. He has had the role since 2014 with a rich background in clinical medicine, public health, health services research. James has dedicated over a decade to developing Care Opinion's online feedback platform, which is the cornerstone for patient and provider communication in the UK, Ireland and Australia, and soon other parts of the world. James's work emphasised the crucial role that patient feedback plays in informing and improving the culture and delivery of services within healthcare systems. His approach is driven by a commitment to make it safe and simple for people to share feedback about their care in ways that fosters real learning and change. This is supported by evidence that online feedback not only boosts staff morale, but also benefits organisational culture by promoting openness, learning and continuous improvement. Today, James will share the research on how patient feedback impacts frontline staff and the broader implications for healthcare practice and policy. His session underscores the profound belief that feedback serves as a relational, a dynamic that not only addresses immediate care concerns, but also shapes the future of healthcare services by fostering a culture of responsiveness and continuous improvement. With that, I welcome James. Thank you very much, James.
Great to be here, Tina. Thanks so much for having me along. And hello to everybody from Sheffield in the UK. It's an early start for us here. So I've not got very much time, so I'm going to rattle on at great speed, and I'll just see if I can share my screen to start off with. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. That's looking good. Yeah, great. Okay. The goal here is to say something about what we know about the impact of online feedback from staff. Quite often from a clinical perspective, clinicians will see this as in a sense, an optional extra. It's nice to hear from patients, but it's not essential to the quality and safety of care. So what do we know about the evidence on the impact on staff of sharing patient feedback? So what I want to do is cover things in this order. I'm going to say something first about why patients post feedback online, because actually that's quite important in understanding the kinds of impacts that feedback can have. And then I'll say something about the research evidence. There's not a vast amount of research evidence on this issue, but it's an emerging evidence base. And we can say something about that. And then we can talk about whether we can increase the beneficial impacts on staff of the feedback that people are posting online. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next 15 minutes. And we'll start off with the evidence on why people post. There is evidence from the Inquire UK project undertaken by Oxford University a few years ago, which produced a number of papers. And this was one of the first. This was a survey of UK adults to ask who'd shared feedback online about their care, not necessarily on Care Opinion, but across all kinds of social media, and why they did that. And this study found that, surprisingly, 42% of people had read feedback about healthcare online, and 8% had shared their own feedback. So this was back in 2018. Those figures, of course, may have changed by now. But this is the graph I want to draw your attention to. This is the why. Why do people post their feedback in this way? And you can see the top 3 reasons here are to inform other patients, to praise the service, and to improve standards of care. So very positive, pro-social motivations, excuse me, for posting feedback online. And the reason I share this is because it'll be interesting to see whether patients actually achieve their goals in sharing that feedback, praising the service, improving standards of care, and so on. From that same Inquire UK study, we also have another paper which has been very influential. And if you only get a chance to read one piece of research today, then I would make it this one. I think this is a really interesting and nuanced study by Fadila Mazandarani, who we've had on our Care Opinion research chats quite a few times now in the UK. And if you're interested in any of these papers, incidentally, if you go to the Care Opinion UK website, click the research link at the bottom of the page, you'll be able to navigate and find these research outputs. There's a lot of research listed on our research outputs page. So what Fadila and her colleagues did was they interviewed about 40 people who'd shared feedback online and asked them why they were doing that, and went into greater depth, obviously, than you can go into in a survey. And there was this strong emphasis on trying to help, trying to improve, trying to support healthcare to be the best it can be. You can see these examples. The NHS is under such huge demands and everything else, but unless we tell them what's wrong, they can't put things right. And then somebody else saying, I firmly believe that in a subtle and perhaps longer term way, I'm contributing to change. And this is what Fadila Mazandarani called caring for care, this notion that what people are doing when they're posting their feedback, whether it's positive or negative, is they're trying to look after the care and the care system and the people providing care to help make it better for other people. So it's a strongly kind of pro-social, altruistic set of motivations, if you like. So do they achieve that? Do patients achieve that? I mean, that's and part of that is the impact on staff. So that's what we're here to think about in this session. And last year, or actually over the last couple of years, we reviewed all the evidence available globally on the impact of positive patient feedback on staff. And the reason we focused in this review on positive patient feedback is for two reasons, really. One is that our experience on Care Opinion is that over 70% of the feedback we receive is positive, which surprises people because quite often clinical staff assume that most of the feedback is going to be negative. But it turns out that most of it is positive, 2/3. And the other reason is that there's a widespread culture in healthcare that assumes that positive feedback isn't really particularly valuable. It might make you feel better for 5 minutes, but it doesn't really make a difference to the quality and safety of care. And I think that's a mistake. To think that we can only learn from negative feedback, I think, is wrong. And I think positive feedback has a lot of benefits. And so we undertook this review. This review was led from Nottingham University in the UK. I played a small role, but not very much. You can see all the authors there. And we reviewed 68 studies published around the world. There are studies on this question, surprisingly, from all 5 continents globally. And there are a wide variety of studies. But to summarize it very quickly, this is quite a technical paper, and you might find it a bit dry if you do try and read it, but we can summarize it very quickly to say that there are a range of positive impacts from positive patient feedback on staff. And as you might expect, one impact is short-term emotional benefits, feeling motivated, improved psychological well-being. So that emotional lift that we often talk about, the effect on morale and so on. So perhaps surprisingly, there was a second category of benefits, which was impacted on work and home interactional benefits. So improved home life relationships, an improved sense of work-life balance, for example, were described in some papers. And then thirdly, work-related benefits like improved performance at work, improved staff retention, reduced absenteeism, reduced burnout. So these are all important things. And obviously, they're important to any healthcare service manager or policymaker to think, well, if we can get these benefits from positive patient feedback, that's got to be worth considering. So these are significant benefits that we should want to learn more about. So that's the big picture looking across 68 studies, but I just want to focus in on one more study now, which is a case report of introducing Care Opinion in one NHS trust in the UK. And this study was based on interviews with staff after a year after care opinion had been introduced in this particular organisation in the UK. And the organisation had been struggling and was under regulatory attention to improve. And that was one of the reasons why they introduced care opinion. And again, you can find this paper through our websites and open access papers. If you go to the research output page, if you're interested in this, you can look at what staff in this organisation were saying about their experience of care opinion. I just want to highlight a few quotes from the paper. And Tina's already mentioned some of these issues. An improvement in morale. So you can see here somebody working in an emergency department. She says, I really love it. Working in the emergency department, you see a lot of terrible things happen. You see a lot of sick patients. So for me, it's such a refreshing change because we get predominantly positive feedback. It's just so nice to be able to cling on to that. I think it helps improve morale. It helps people's resilience as well, to know there are actually some really grateful people out there. And of course, this quote is entirely consistent with the research evidence that we just looked at from the previous paper. And then confidence. Somebody said, care opinion has impacted the confidence I have when I'm on the ward because I feel like I can talk to and comfort patients and relatives more since responding to challenging comments. I thought this was an interesting example of taking skills learned online into the offline face-to-face world. And then lastly, pride. It gives you a sense of pride. You know, you can recognize actually the work you're doing within your department is working. So these really nice benefits for staff, again, important and worth having in any workforce. So let's just turn lastly to this question of, can we increase these kinds of benefits? So people will often say, well, you know, positive feedback, what are we supposed to do with it? Where does it, you know, how do we use it? How do we get these benefits? And can we increase the benefits that we get through the positive feedback that flows through care opinion? So I just want to, we don't have strong research evidence on this, but we do have an awful lot of practical experience. So I just wanted to share some of the things people are doing in the UK with their feedback, positive and negative. And this is one of the most popular things to do. People share it. So sharing the feedback is absolutely crucial. If you want to produce an effect on your workforce, on staff providing care, you're not going to do that unless you share the feedback with them. If they don't see the feedback, if they're not seeing it regularly or daily or even in real time, then how can it possibly have an effect for them? How can you produce those benefits? And so one of the most popular things for staff teams using care opinion to do is to share it, make it very visible. And this is one of the ways people do it. You can see people creating their notice boards, putting up their stories, sharing them not just with staff, but with patients too, coming to the service, and getting all kinds of positive vibes and good feelings from that, and encouragement, and all the other things that we've just talked about that affect on morale and confidence, on pride in the service. So that's the most obvious thing you can do, and that's a very simple and straightforward matter, isn't it? And again, you can see in these tweets people describing the impacts of sharing stories in this way and seeing stories that are being shared in this way at work. So there's Louise at the top. She says, one of the things that gives me joy at work during my week, reading so many positive stories on care opinion and seeing how other stories help to make improvements. So that's a really nice explanation of what's going on here. And then Sarah on the right here says, I purposely stopped by our Edinburgh Emergency Medicine Compliments Board and read our latest care opinion Scott feedback today. A timely reminder that doing what you can despite the challenges really, really matters to folk. Again, you can see in this tweet that really strong sense that reading this feedback on a regular basis, seeing the impact that you're having for people, can be profoundly motivating for teams, especially at times when they're are feeling really weary and really tired from the workload. So people don't just create their notice boards and stick stories up. They do it, of course, electronically as well. These are some examples. The top one there from Northern Ireland, display screens in a facility showing stories in waiting areas, and then the bottom one in a GP practice in East London. And that bottom one is using the Care Opinion slideshow feature, which anybody can use, and that's a quick and easy way to share Care Opinion stories on a display screen, so anybody can use that today. And then I thought this rather creative one on the right was rather nice to share as well, celebrating the responses that people post by giving them a mug there saying, I got great feedback on Care Opinion, and celebrating that positive feedback with staff. I thought that was a pretty nice way to do it. And then perhaps slightly more ambitiously, but might be something you want to think about, sharing feedback openly. This is a photo from a corridor in a mental health facility in the UK, in which they've taken a quote from a story shared on Care Opinion and painted it on the wall, so that everybody who walks past that quote can see the impact and the importance of that service on service users and how people are benefiting from the kind of compassionate care they provide. And again, that kind of thing can be extremely motivating for staff. So this is my last slide. I'll just finish up with this. You can see the impact here pretty much in real time on Twitter. Somebody saying, when I read this, I remember why I became a nurse. Thank you for appreciating us and what we do. And you can see here the connection, the way that stories connect people back to the motivations, the values, the ambitions that they had when they entered healthcare in the first place. It's easy to forget those things, to become disconnected from our values and our intrinsic motivations. And I think stories can help us reconnect with the things that took us into healthcare in the first place. So these are some of the things we know about impact. I'll stop sharing now, and of course, always happy to take questions or comments.
Thanks very much, James. Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we could just take a couple of minutes. We'd certainly feel free to post your questions in the chat. Our team is on standby and also can flag these with James. So thank you so much, James. That was really poignant, and it's very creative ways to be really sharing the feedback. Really appreciate those. Also, just a note for our attendees that I have allowed you to share your mic or unmute and share your camera as well during this question and answer time.
So one thing I might add while we're waiting to see if there are any questions is, so this issue of the impact of gratitude coming through Care Opinion, because there is this extraordinary gratitude stream, and it can be very powerful, and we don't know a lot about the impacts of gratitude. There is some research on gratitude. But one of the things, again, we're working on with the University of Nottingham, who led on the research review, is we're looking at whether we can create a program of research just much more explicitly around what impacts could we achieve if we directed the gratitude in a very deliberate way towards frontline teams. Can we create new forms of intervention through Care Opinion that would allow us to create new and beneficial impact for staff through the gratitude that people are sharing? So that's really where we're wanting to head with this, is learning much more about this.
Doesn't look like we've got any questions, but they don't have to stop now. If there are questions that come to your mind afterwards, please post them. Thanks very much again, James, for kicking off the forum with your excellent presentation and for introducing us to some great research, which some of the links have been shared. Please take the time to visit the papers and to gain further insights from those. And I think a really key thing that you highlighted, that a large proportion of the patient feedback is positive. So and how this brings benefits to staff, such as the ones you've pointed out from the papers, emotional benefits, whether they're work-home interactional benefits, work-related benefits. We just need to know how to use the positive feedback and how to increase the benefits. So, and you shared excellent practical examples of how this could be done, or at least trialled. And we will have questions, time for questions perhaps at the end as well, if anyone comes up with those. The next presenter, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Linda Craig as one of the speakers today, and I will tell you a little bit about Linda. Linda resides in Northern Ireland with her family and a charming array of pets. Professionally, she's dedicated to her career to emergency nursing and currently holds the position of Regional Patient Client Experience Lead at the Public Health Agency. This role has allowed her to spearhead the introduction of care opinion across the health and social care system in Northern Ireland. Linda also has a Master's in Advanced Healthcare and also a postgraduate certificate in education for healthcare professionals in nursing. And she also combines her healthcare expertise with a passion for art. She looks forward to sharing her valuable insights and experience with us today. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Tina, and it's an absolute pleasure to be part of your forum today. I'm just going to share screen and hopefully over the next 15 minutes have a bit of a discussion with you about our journey in Northern Ireland implementing care opinion, but maybe more importantly, this new thinking in my world around how patient stories really are the DNA of the healthcare. They really are the pieces that bring together the humanity and the world to which we work within. Sometimes in healthcare, in our world, it can become very process driven, very target driven, and there is a belief within ourselves that these stories really do help us to remember and value the people who engage with us in our health and social care system. So I want to just give you a sense of that in the presentation, and my contact details are at the start of the presentation. I would welcome any questions in the chat box, but also if there's anything following the presentation to contact me, I'd be more than welcome to do so. So yeah, I don't apologise for starting my biography with who I am in terms of as a mum, as a pet owner, as a wife, because we all have a story behind our professional faces. We all are people, and this is the message that we're trying to get across in Northern Ireland as we roll out care opinion. It's about understanding the people behind the illness, the people behind the numbers, the people behind the statistics. And that's what we mean when we talk about patient stories being that DNA of healthcare, and care opinion really supporting us with that. So just a wee bit about if I can get slides to move. Northern Ireland, hopefully most of you will be a wee bit familiar with us. We're quite well known for our links with the Titanic. We have a wonderful coastline around the Giant's Causeway, some amazing cities. We're very well known for our food and for feeding people when they come to Northern Ireland. If you ever come across the pond to us, you'd be very welcome. We're also quite well known for having a volatile government space, and at this point in time we're very happy to have our government back into play. So in terms of the context of Northern Ireland, we're small. You could fit our country over 100 times into Australia. Our population is 1.9 million, which is about a 1/12 of what your population is for your country. However, it was really interesting when I first met Rebecca, because we talked about care opinion and we talked about experience. Much of what we talked about has parallels, and it just reflects the fact that, you know, we're all human beings. There's an element of it, regardless of the size of the country, the size of the system, to which we're trying to embed this. And in some ways, I do think you could believe we're actually quite a good test bed for trying to bring care opinion in at a regional, national, strategic level. So this is the context of health and social care in Northern Ireland. We have 5 trusts, and then we've one regional trust, which is the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service. And then I work within the Public Health Agency, which is an overarching arm's length body that links in with the government space. And like I say, we have in Northern Ireland implemented care opinion across every single aspect of health and social care. We are an integrated system. We've been integrated for many, many years, but we're going through just a new review of that, because integrated care is becoming a real passion right across the nations. And we recently hosted the International Conference for Integrated Care, which hopefully some of you may have had an opportunity to link with. So this is the context to which we've decided to bring care opinion and to bring it as a big bang in many ways, making sure that everybody, the population of Northern Ireland, could tell their story about engaging with health and social care using the care opinion service. Care Opinion is part of a programme that I'm responsible for. It's called the Regional Patient Client Experience Programme, and Care Opinion helps us achieve our vision. So the vision for the programme is to proactively enable service users, families and carers to share their narrative and stories. It's about making people aware of the opportunity that they can come forth and tell their story. There is a place to which they can leave their feedback. For across health and social care in Northern Ireland, and it has to be through a mechanism which allows us to analyse at a regional level. So there's something around consistency of how people tell their story once and how it can be used in multiple layers in multiple ways right across the system. So it's more than that service space where it's a one-to-one conversation, which is probably the most awesome aspect of Care Opinion, but from my perspective in a regional service, it's about being able to collectively pull this together to a space where we can look at all the unique elements of people's stories and learn from it, and more importantly bring change at different levels of health and social care. So when you think about DNA and how it's the smallest molecule that generates the unique aspect of someone, that in itself is, by putting these all together, we're starting to weave that in through the health system of Northern Ireland. So Care Opinion is part of that vision, and certainly what we're finding in Northern Ireland is a great enthusiasm starting to grow around this fact that we want to ask people for their feedback. Some people and staff will find that to themselves somewhat bizarre. Working in emergency departments, all my career, it would have been a challenge to have really thought, well, my goodness, do we not know what the feedback is? Surely we know we get X number of complaints every month. But we've just heard from James, you know, there is this unhidden, there's this information of feedback that we had never tapped into until we had Care Opinion. And I can concur in terms of the positivity. We have over 82% of our over 20,000 stories now that are coming back and telling us, you know, where we're doing it well. And we're looking at how we learn from that excellence using the Learn from Excellence model. So there's much to be done, and hopefully in the presentation you'll see that we have started, but there's still lots to be done, and so much opportunity and potential. The approach was really important in Northern Ireland when we were trying to realise this vision. The first thing was understanding that it would bring new information into health and social care. It wasn't about us defining the questions. It wasn't about us looking for what we wanted to know. It is about bringing new information into a system where the people own that. They tell you that. It is their story. It is their private story to which we have the privilege to actually listen to. And there's a thing in psychotherapy called your near and perfect world. And I very often think about that in the health service, that we every so often get a glimpse of people's near and perfect and very private world that we as healthcare professionals become part of just for a point in time, and then may leave or may sustain someone. But the story in itself brings new information and new insight. It's also something different, and that was really important when we brought Care Opinion into Northern Ireland, is that Care Opinion is different. It's a new approach. It's not about, yet again, another survey. It's not about a one-way system of come all, give us all this information, because actually it is more than that. It is about developing that relationship with the public again. And following the pandemic, this is something that's been so very important, is building up this conversation, building up this two-way feedback mechanism. So it's definitely a new approach, and it's an approach that we've never seen before, which in some ways is challenging. People don't really like anything a bit too shiny and new, that, you know, we don't like to take too many big risks. But this is done in such a safe way that we are finding that staff are now starting to grow in their confidence of how they do the feedback mechanism. And it's also a new challenge, and it was recognising that from the outset in Northern Ireland. So when I say a new challenge, I mean in the terms of we live in a system that is a performance matrix, and you're going to go on today and talk about a governance framework, and it can be very much about numbers. And I remember our permanent secretary asking me about value for money. It's what.
Linda, you've just muted there for a moment. We'll just have a look at what we can do in the background. We're not able to unmute you. There we go. Got you back.
Okay. So I don't know, something's happened with my headphones, so forgive me for that. I'm going to try and go without headphones. Yeah, so it was a new challenge in Northern Ireland because everything can be about statistics. Everything can be about money. Everything can be about the data. And it's understanding that this is about quality. This is not about performance. It's not about the numbers. It is about the quality of the story, the quality of our services, the quality of the response. And that in itself is a new way of thinking, something to which we find quite challenging, particularly at the start. So we have had a plan in place now since 2020. We launched Care Opinion just off the back of the first pandemic, but the first phase of the pandemic, but the first year leading up to that, we spent a lot of time engaging with colleagues in Care Opinion UK, looking to our key stakeholders, bringing on board the leaders in Northern Ireland, ensuring that people knew that this was coming, so that people had a confidence in it, so that people had a chance to talk about their worries and their concerns. When we launched, then we moved into a phase that was very, very focused on story generation and engagement. It was very much about how do we get the opportunity out there? How do we ensure that people know they can tell their story and do this in such a way that we're getting the stories in, but we're responding in a timely manner, that we're trying to live out the values of health and social care and the values to which Care Opinion represent. And this was a whole system approach. So this was every service, every team, every trust in Northern Ireland, including the ambulance service. And this is backed up by an investment by the government to have paid champions in every trust to make sure that there is a go-to person to support any staff or anyone who needs to tell their story. But where we're at now is phase 3. And there's no real end to phase 3, because it is about embedding Care Opinion into culture. And that in itself feels like it's just going to take time. We do need to get to that position where everything that we're working through, Care Opinion is part of it, where there's a new service being brought in, being led by the government space, where there's new transformation happening, where we're delivering upon new services, new ways of working. Bringing Care Opinion along in that system is vitally important as a way of getting that mechanism for feedback. And ultimately, we want to see Care Opinion supporting us as a primary mechanism for sharing feedback across health and social care in Northern Ireland. So bearing that in mind and where we're at, we're very often asked about the stories, why stories? Why is it that the Regional Patient Client Experience Programme in Northern Ireland focuses on narrative and focuses on stories? And I took the opportunity to ask a friend of mine who is an author. She's a fictional author, but she bases it on some of the history of Northern Ireland. And these are a few of the things that she told me about why she finds telling stories to be the most engaging way for learning and for getting a message out. And we've already heard a little bit of that, Tina, as you opened up the conference around, why we tell stories. First of all, we tell stories because it captures and it celebrates a unique perspective, someone's own perspective, their personal perspective, how they see our services. So the story in itself helps you to encapsulate that, helps you celebrate that. And that unique perspective doesn't have to be always positive. And certainly we do get our share of stories where lots has to be done and change has to happen. But it's a way to which we can capture that, a way to which we can demonstrate it. It does help with building relationships and supports trust, and I've already alluded to that in terms of it being a new way of doing things. And it is about supporting staff to understand that it is not scary, that it can be done in a safe way to which we can invite people to give that feedback and value that feedback, making it more than just a number, understanding the person behind the story. It does generate understanding and empathy. Very often when we're all beyond capacity, when we're all working within constraints of the health service, it can be very difficult to remember the person behind the story. And I look back on a number of people I have met through my nursing career, and when I have learned of their story, it really does leave a lasting impression on you and how you nursed them and how you looked after them. So it's so vitally important that people don't see these stories as a threatening way, but in a way to which it will help us link in a more empathetic way with the people who use our services. I do believe it evokes emotion, and some people find that scary, but some of our stories are very emotive. People take time to sit and share with us when they are ready to do so through Care Opinion, and it does create a memory. Many people will say, you know, I really enjoyed reading that report, or I really enjoyed that presentation, but they only enjoyed it because it was woven in with stories. And so we're finding that at a strategic level in Northern Ireland, we're using these stories, we're using them in our reporting mechanisms, we're using them in strategic design. And the stories themselves are evoking emotions and memories within leaders, helping people to stay connected to really the people to whom we serve. And it is a powerful way to communicate. It is a powerful way to generate new ideas. It is a conversation. It does get people talking in the staff rooms. It does help with creativity and helps us to be much more solution focused whenever we look at where the improvements need to happen or how we need to build on when it's going really well. So there are a couple of enablers that I wanted to just share with you to help us make this happen. We do have a mechanism to champion implementation at every level. We do have really good, solid government support. This is a systematic approach in Northern Ireland, and we have very key leaders. But those leaders also exist at every level of the health service. It can't be a top-down approach where it's just done onto people. People need to see it for its worth themselves. They need to champion it for themselves, and we have that at every level, and we find that to be very helpful because there's never an opportunity where you wouldn't be able to get someone to help you if you were concerned about a story or how to make the story and reply to it. There is a set of agreed visions and underpinning principles. It is agreed that Care Opinion is a service for the people of Northern Ireland. It's not a service for the health service. You know, it's not something for the staff. It has great impact on the staff, but in terms of who is the service for, the service is for the people of Northern Ireland. And it's understanding that by agreeing that, you do approach it quite differently. And we try to focus upon learning and not performing. And in some ways, that last enabler is something that we're really focusing in on in this incoming year as part of phase 3 to really get this into culture. It has to be more than collecting numbers. It has to be more than that sense of, look how well we're doing. We've got X amount of criticality score zeros. Those are all worth celebrating. But to learn, people must engage with the story. That has got to be vital. And so there's a much heavier focus in Northern Ireland this incoming year as one of our priorities to look at learning and not performing. Some of you may be very familiar with this quote. Don Berwick is a professor in America, and he has done quite a number of the reviews in the United Kingdom. And as part of one of his reviews, he used this quote, and we use it a lot in Northern Ireland: hearing the patient voice at every level even when that voice is a whisper. And it's so vitally important that the mechanisms that we deliver in Northern Ireland reach as many people as possible, and so that they can tell their story in the way to which they wish to when they're ready to. And so Care Opinion is bringing us that opportunity to allow us to hear those stories at every level, regardless of who you are or where you're coming from. And in some ways, that's the piece that we like to celebrate when we consider how those stories are now becoming woven into the health and social care in Northern Ireland. So that's everything from my presentation. My apologies for the technical issues, and happy to hand over for any questions or comment.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Linda. What an incredibly powerful presentation. And I'm just going to set up our settings to allow people to have their cameras on and their microphones unmuted there. So if anyone has any questions, you should now be able to ask those. You can also feel free to pop your questions in the chat. But while we do sort of give people a moment to digest this, I just wanted to touch base or come back, if I could, to this idea of bringing the dialogue away from performance. A lot of the time we do see that staff can become fearful of what this might mean to them. We also see staff fearful of any sort of reactions they might have to responses they post on the site. And I'm just interested if you've got any tips or ideas on how you did drive the dialogue to be towards learning and away from performance.
I think it's actually, you maybe just answered your own question, Rebecca. It's about how you term it. So when we first brought Care Opinion in, people were thinking, what is this about? Is this just another Big Brother is watching you? Is this just the government coming to watch us and find another sort of back door to nearly assess us? But when you look at it and present Care Opinion as here's the opportunities to which you can learn and bring it in under the term of learning, I think that is vitally important. The piece with staff that we find to be the hardest and one to which we're challenging is that people only ever engaged with feedback when it was negative, when it was a massive complaint, when it was what we call it in our system a serious adverse incident, so where it all went badly wrong. That's when staff engaged with feedback, and being able to show them that you can engage with feedback earlier, that you can actually access that feedback in a safe way, that they can learn from that and make their small changes, ripples of change as an early intervention. It empowers them to own that. And there is something around the ownership of the stories. We can use them in a government space, but the stories belong to the author of the story, which I think that was a very unique piece in Northern Ireland, because all of a sudden staff were like, whose data is this? Who owns this story? And Care Opinion just came with this very balanced way of going, well, actually, the author owns the story. They're responsible for it. That's their story. And by bringing that sense of personalizing the story, making sure we understood the privilege to which we were to be able to hear those stories, it then became less about a critical lens on people and more about, I want to know more. I want to understand the experience that I'm sort of delivering to people within my services or on a one-to-one basis. So I think for us, Rebecca, it's how we packaged it. Now we are going through probably a very timely review of how we do complaints, how we do serious adverse incidents. And in every part of that journey, I'm going, and where's Care Opinion in that? Where's the stories that we hear earlier in the system? And how do we intervene earlier? We will never prove that there wouldn't be a public inquiry or there wouldn't be a serious adverse incident due to the stories. But it is about understanding Care Opinion as an intervention at that point in time, early enough in someone's journey. So much of that is new terminology and a new way of thinking that we do appreciate in Northern Ireland, that we're pushing a culture here. We need to change people's thinking and we need to be gracious to ourselves to give that time. But that in itself, we are starting to see a shift in thinking. Even those who were very resistant at the start, particularly my colleagues in primary care, are now letting us in because they're starting to see the value of it, and for them as learners. So I think that's the vital bit for us.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that insight. It's very, very helpful.
Okay, there are some comments shared, but I don't see any questions. And thank you again, Linda, for your compelling and very inspiring presentation of why patient stories are truly the DNA of a healthcare system and what large-scale implementation could look like. And your overarching vision is spot on in terms of proactively enabling service users, families and carers to share their narrative, or what you called a new approach to feedback, which is linked to quality. And then having that mindset shift of using that feedback for learning and change at all levels of the health system. Truly inspirational and something we will aspire to do in Australia. And thank you for reiterating the importance and impact of telling stories and for sharing those enablers. We will surely use those as well. There are number of senior policy makers and informers online who I'm sure are taking notes and are taking notes of everything you've shared. And the one thing that really sticks and we all need to take note of is it is a service for the people. I love that. It's really powerful. It's not a service for the health services or the staff. It helps them learn, but it's really a service for the people. Sensational. Thank you. Our next speaker is Dan Smith, and I'd like to introduce Dan. Dan brings a wealth of experience from his diverse roles across community service, financial planning and education sectors. He is born and raised in Central Queensland, and Dan has chosen to deeply invest in his community. He holds a number of non-executive director roles, and he serves currently as the project manager for the Smiths Family Communities for Children in Rockhampton, where he excels in building community relationships and driving impactful outcomes. His dedication extends to healthcare, where his leadership contributed significantly to the Central Queensland Health and Hospital Service, enhancing local health services and governance. Welcome, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Tina. Thanks everybody for joining me in this online forum. And also for listening to my presentation. I came to be here with you through a personal relationship with Tina. It's sort of one of those sort of storytelling moments in itself that Tina's daughter was starting a journey in the Rural Medical Pathways program, and I had the symbolic joy of sort of presenting her what I think might have been her first stethoscope. So that was my journey there. Not long after, an interesting relationship developed, and I twisted Tina's arm to actually join me on the board of the Central Queensland Hospital Foundation. So it's all about relationships for me. Many believe relationships are the lifeblood of doing business in community successfully, and so much of what we do depends upon the interconnected bonds both inside and outside of an organisation. There's much research that supports that purpose-driven stakeholder collaboration drives sustainability of effort and delivers more powerful social results. Whilst many stakeholder relationships are still cemented by contracts and written agreements, the need for human-centric, trust-based partnerships is increasingly evident. Most modern organisations recognise this and are investing in stakeholder management strategies. But by understanding and valuing stakeholders holistically, our health services can gain greater benefits, heighten loyalty, increase creativity, real genuine reciprocity. This approach requires initial and indeed ongoing investments in time and trust, but really does provide long-term results. In essence, this sustainable impact that I'd like to reflect upon and share, it really truly hinges on the quality of stakeholder relationships, and it really points to that positive future where collaboration and mutual benefit sort of is really what it's all about. Now, I'm not focusing today on things like the 8 principles of person-centered care, or going to spend time unpacking the factors contributing to delivery of person-centered care. But I really want to acknowledge that those concepts are very important when integrating feedback into health governance systems. Equally, we could invest a lot of time in exploring policies and practices and people And as the colleague in the previous presenter mentioned about place in Northern Ireland, the place there is very different to my place in Rockhampton in central Queensland, but it really reinforces all of those things in place. What surrounds us, shapes us, it's very important. But the P word that I want to offer my reflective learnings about is another P word, and it's really centering on partnering. Okay. So when I was having a yarn with TJ and the Care Opinion team, I recalled a Blinkist review of a book called The Stakeholder Strategy by Ian Svensson, and it contained a framework for building stronger, more impactful stakeholder relationships. Now, with that fresh in my mind, I thought that Foster framework could be used to symbolically illustrate much of the health consumer journey and the partnering journey I've experienced over many years. In so many things we do as humans, good relationships emerge as the sticky glue that binds us together. Sometimes it's about swallowing and enjoying a brand of beer like that Foster's that socially you normally wouldn't choose. Sometimes it's not making a fuss about pineapple on a pizza when normally you might like more anchovies instead. But if you just pause for a moment and reflect on your own personal relationships and the dedication, the patience and care that you need to invest intentionally to sustain them. Now, if you apply that sentiment to the world of business, the world of the health as a health consumer, as a health worker, building enduring value-rich connections becomes, it's a dark, complex art. But for me, this is where a framework like Foster can emerge as a beacon, a shining light to shine a path towards creating thriving, reciprocal stakeholder relationships. Yeah, I'm not going to sort of labour too much on the words, but as we go through it, if you begin with F for foundations, imagine you're setting out on a voyage, and wouldn't you first want to ensure that your compass is tuned perfectly? Likewise, with your foundation with stakeholders, you want to ensure that you've got mutual goals, values, and aspirations. Like that's your guiding compass. For the colleagues online, that can be your North Star. In South, in the Southern Hemisphere, there's no Northern Star, so maybe it's a Southern Cross, but it's giving you that common direction in terms of where you're going. It's that initial handshake that you have with people, that mutual nod, that signal of an alignment of shared vision and success. As you sail forward, that organisational alignment comes to the forefront. It's about ensuring your ship that you're sailing in is seaworthy, and it's tailored for the long journey ahead. Now, if you think about for a moment bureaucracies that we all play within at different times, there's policies and there's procedures and there's gatekeepers and there's people, and they're really important. But is that culturally conducive to seamless collaborations? Does it resonate with a shared vision? So really, you got to do work in nurturing your crew, your team, and you got to groom that spirit of partnership and foster an environment where collaboration isn't an afterthought, but it's just an important part of just how you're doing things. It's not something different. Once you have that shared vision and you've got a streamlined organisation, then you can look to co-create that shared strategy. Picture two artists with different styles when they're sort of trying to collaborate on a canvas. They're all leveraging their strengths and harmonising their differences. So really, that's the space, that's the environment that you intentionally need to create, where there's mutual respect and flexibility that allows that partnership to evolve organically, and you can go into those uncharted areas. Lots of symbolism there. But the heart of any relationship beats with trust. And it's not just about agreements and contracts. It's about that unspoken bond, that quiet understanding that forms over time. There's transparent conversations, difficult conversations, actively listening and empathizing. Consumers, stakeholders, they need to be seen not just as part of the process, but as individuals with shared aspirations, concerns, and dreams. As you go along that journey, sometimes the compass needs occasional recalibration, and that's where that evaluation becomes important. It's that opportunity to reflect, reassess and rejuvenate and reset the targets for where you are going. Might be tactics. It might be a way to sort of sail around some sort of stormy clouds on the horizon. But likewise, the R in Foster, in that acronym, it's really the essence of what it's all about. It's not the start of the process. It's about continuity and repetition. It reminds us that building relationships isn't a sprint, but it's a marathon that sort of takes persistence over time, patience, and a long-term commitment to those core values you got from the start there. It's about planting seeds and not digging up those seeds to see if they've taken root. There's an element of trust there that you've got to wait time for the tree to grow before it starts bearing some fruit. So I think that's important in that space there. Naturally, there's a bit of skepticism in terms of, hey, it's just another wishy-washy framework. But my experience over time is that so much of it's coming back to those authentic relationships that you built and having that shared foundation together. In terms of, I guess a previous speaker spoke about an alignment of values and shared mission. But that real power, the kind of change landscapes doesn't come from different missions and different things. It's about having that shared vision. In central Queensland, we had a destination 2030 plan. We had a journey with a consumer and advisory committee that developed, and we had different points of how to get to A to B, and there was lots of different paths one could take. There were steps that we took that weren't the right steps to take, but it was just a learning journey. We were actually taking action. Over time, that shared social mission became a bit like a lighthouse and drew people in with its glow. And our journey together in our community is really testament to that perseverance and that patience. Over time, different missions became sharper and clearer and more aligned, and that ended up leading to the formation of our Central Queensland Hospital Foundation. What we've now got at the moment with CQ Shines, there's that shared vision there to facilitate better health and brighter futures for Central Queenslanders. So if I throw to another analogy for a moment, that Rome wasn't built in a day, but all the time they're laying bricks each and every hour. So that's that persistence, that ongoing patience. But the other thing we've got to be careful of in that reflection is it's not about having fancy documents or shiny brochures. It's about being authentic to what we're doing here. You might have all the best fancy words in the world, but if the actual actions you take sort of cause concern and cause shadows of doubt, it just won't stay in the relationships. You've got to be authentic, have conviction, and can keep building on those bridges of trust there, and it'll stand the time of stormy weather as well. An earlier statement that I alluded to, it's worth repeating now. The heart of any relationship beats with trust. So it's not about formal agreements and contracts. It's about that unspoken bond. It's that quiet understanding that forms over time. It's nurtured by transparent conversations, by difficult conversations, by actively listening and empathizing, by seeing stakeholders, consumers, health workers. They're all key parts of the jigsaw puzzle that comes together, but also recognizing that they're all individuals with their own aspirations, concerns, and dreams. The speaker before sort of mentioned about measuring and recording. It's important that when you're doing your metrics and measurements, they're not just figures on the paper. For me, they should be seen as a signpost on a journey, and recognize that journey is not a solitary one just for one entity. It's about everybody involved in that partnership there together. If you've got guiding structures, let them guide and shape the path that you need to go along. And if the path needs to bend to go around a few things at different stages, navigate those turns together. The partnering I'm sort of reflecting on and describing, it's about where there's integrity meeting sustainability, where diversity dances with inclusion. In such an environment, those partnerships don't just exist, but they can flourish and produce great things like the Central Queensland Hospital Foundation CQ Shines. For me, it's a perfect example there of a shared social mission that has developed over a long time. This is 11, 12, 15 years that we're talking about in terms of it forming and coming to where it is now. In terms of your measurements, it's not about capturing numbers, but it's about getting that social mission into your daily operations. And that does take time, and it takes consistency of purpose from the top tier executives right down to your grassroots people in terms of the volunteers pushing around the trolleys in the health service. But in my mind, the natural flow of everything beats with relationship building. It's about engaging in continual dialogue with stakeholders and ensuring that strategies remain relevant, and it keeps on resonating with the evolving interests that might occur over time as well. Before I mentioned showcasing, so that's really important as a reflection there, that don't shy away from the spotlight. Make sure that stories get chronicled, celebrate the wins, celebrate the challenges, and through those reports that can reflect and resonate and inspire other people to sort of come on that journey with you as a consumer. We all have annual reports that we need to write. Sometimes they're very boring, staid governance documents. But in the process of developing those reports, don't have it as just a purely yearly governance ritual that you do. Use it as a stop check moment to reflect on the health of your partnerships, your health on your stakeholders. Keep people involved in that partnering effort, and use it as a way to stay anchored to that shared mission, even when it's perhaps not as healthy as you'd like it to be. The ultimate goal is to remain transparent and accountable, and not just try and achieve national quality standards, but to do the right thing each and every day and drive enduring success. For me, if I was reflecting on looking forward and looking back and reflecting on my sort of key lessons over time, it really is that this foster framework I spoke about before, it's not in the start of the beginning, it's in that repetition. With so many things I'm involved in, and even things I'm easing out of my involvement at the moment, it reminds me that building relationships isn't a sprint, but it's an ongoing long-term investment that you need to keep on fertilizing the seeds of the relationship. You need to build rapport with the new people that come into key roles, and it's just that ongoing commitment to sort of keep things moving along. Again, there's my details, but I'm a strong believer that the way that you foster your relationship with stakeholders through collaborative partnering is of the utmost importance. If we can move away from transactional thinking about the next report, the next standards you need meet, or the inquiry into a particular incident, it's all about getting those mutually beneficial stakeholder partnerships. Like for me, one of the key things that prompted me to get involved in the health system was my son had basically he was like a pincushion. There was multiple attempts of trying to get a cannula reinserted after his veins had closed. Now, I was a bit privileged because I was in a number of different committees. I could actually sort of see what happened with the feedback that I provided at that stage, that they changed policies. They had no more than 2 attempts, and then the ultrasound machines had to be used to sort of actually insert the things into his veins. But if I wasn't actively involved as a consumer as I was, I would never have known about what was going on. So for me, that's where it's also great to have these online platforms for people that might not have had the same confidence that I do to actually speak up as a consumer. So it's wonderful. For me, stay engaged, use frameworks like this to sort of keep on playing. Start small if need be. It's all about the trust. It's all about the journey. But I think the important thing is just to actually start in the first place. Don't wait until you've got the perfect system. Take a step and then take another step. And that's probably my key reflections for now, Tina, if I can. Lots of other moments of truth and storytelling I could go on to. I love a lovely story, but that's what I thought I'd share for today. That's game over for me.
Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's been fantastic to hear your insights, and particularly coming from your experience where you've been in the healthcare system as a consumer representative and advocate, as a businessman. You've got history there as a chairman of a hospital foundation trust, and also as a parent of a child who had some pretty significant health challenges there, where you did need to stand up, because we know that what we often hear is from consumers who don't realise that they've got that power, that they have their right to be heard. And so that's incredibly powerful what you've shared with us. We've just been, monitoring the chat at the moment. We don't have any questions, but we do sort of more have some comments coming through. And I think it's interesting when you talk about that foster model and the partnering. One question I would have, I suppose, is we often see the idea, particularly with the feedback, of almost a set and forget mentality can occur, where you provide the mechanism, but do you think there's a role for more active engagement, where organisations can be trying to sort of reach their patients through conversations about experiences?
Definitely, yes. Like for me, it's about sort of providing that pathway for people to do that. If they're not confident doing that personally themselves, I think that's when we can have more focus groups, we can have more interest groups, we can have people in a space of psychological safety together to actually sort of share. And when people tell stories, other people might be more prepared to sort of share their stories and their learnings and things that come out as well. So that's my very long answer to sort of say yes, I definitely agree with the thing that you sort of planted as a conversation starter.
Yeah, that's right. So I encourage people to keep the comments and questions coming through, because sometimes there are, some barriers of staff not feeling empowered necessarily to go out and ask those questions as well. And that's something we'd like to explore as we go along.
Thanks, Beck, and thanks again, Dan, for sharing the foster model, which I'm sure others are used to in terms of using it, or elements of it in conjunction with other stakeholder collaborative models. and pointing out to us that relationships, partnerships, collaboration are vital for any meaningful undertaking, and partnering with consumers is of utmost importance. And there's nothing more empowering than sharing your story and then knowing that someone is keenly listening and going to use it for learning and improvement. And that is what we aim to do with Care Opinion, to empower the consumer to be able to do that, and work with the health services to meaningfully use the feedback for learning and improvement. So with that, I would like to introduce our next presenter. Our next presenter is Liz Newton. And Liz is a dedicated patient partner at the New South Wales Agency for Clinical Innovation, where she plays a pivotal role in enhancing capabilities within organisations and its partners to effectively collaborate with consumers in the design and delivery of health services. With a rich background spanning 18 years at the Hunter New England Local Health District in various educational and consumer partnership roles, Liz has been at the forefront of person-centred initiatives. Notably, she pioneered the state's first consumer participation unit and has been a strong advocate for systemic changes to foster human-centred healthcare. Her collaborative efforts have led to significant innovations such as the police and ambulance early access to mental health, triage via telehealth, and the Hearts in Health movement, and the Towards Zero Suicide initiative. Liz's commitments to this field is deeply personal. Her lived experiences with mental health, suicidality, and surviving domestic and family violence have profoundly shaped her approach. These experiences not only fueled her passion, but also equipped her with unique insights that bridge the gap between clinical operations and individual patient experience. Liz leverages her storytelling skills to advocate for meaningful, empathetic engagements within healthcare. Liz today will share invaluable insights on what staff need to be open and willing to engage in two-way feedback. Welcome, Liz.
Thanks, Tina. That's excruciating hearing all of that and should never be done. There we go. So welcome, everyone. I want to acknowledge I'm dialing in from a Wabakal country in Newcastle, New South Wales, and it's a real joy to be here. A little nervous, but I'm sure from what I've seen so far, you're a very forgiving and welcoming and warm group of people. I want to talk about this from the perspective of the things that I have seen, heard and listened to over the 14 years I've been in lived expertise roles, and they've all been roles embedded in the public health system in New South Wales. So as a consumer consultant, as consumer participation lead and engagement manager for Hunter New England Mental Health Service, and now as patient partner at the ACI. And these lived experience roles are roles that require me to straddle two worlds, the world of health staff and the health system, and the world of consumers, families and loved ones accessing the system. What you see in front of you there are a couple of quotes that I've heard said to me many, many times. And I think it's really interesting because what I take from that is that I feel as though my peers, my clinical peers, my support peers in health believe that a lived experience role perhaps gives the person in it a license to connect with patients and families in a way that sometimes staff feel they can't. That by virtue of having lived experience on my name badge, it gives me permission to connect. And we've heard from other speakers these ideas or these themes emerging around power, and these themes emerging around culture, these themes emerging around, someone's even said staff may even be afraid around feedback. And I think This information in these quotes is really valuable information worth unpacking alone. So my quick tour of my mind when I brainstormed what staff might need in order to engage in two-way feedback. Here it is, a busy slide. I believe that people need to feel they have permission. I believe that we need in health to shift from a transactional paradigm to a relational one. I believe we need time, and I believe we need to feel safe and capable to do so. I also believe that despite considerable rhetoric around the value and the drive for patient experience being a priority within public health systems, the odds are actually stacked against human connection, shared power, and person-centeredness. We do have policies, papers, guidelines, standards, all that say that we should be partnering with consumers, but they don't tend to be yielding any real impact on the ground from where I stand. And I don't believe that you can have human-centered service in a context that favors speed, volume, and transactional engagement over actual relational connection. You can't have two-way connected conversations if the time is not afforded to that, and the processes aren't made safe and respectful for all people participating. We've got to recognise that our system and our policies and our processes and our structures don't foster connection and equity and shared power, and in some instances they actually deny it. And I can give you a really concrete example here of the number of times as a peer worker working in the mental health unit at the Mater Hospital in Newcastle, staff would often use privacy policy as a reason for not inviting families and loved ones and carers into case consultations and case conferences, and also care planning. Ironically, they were perfectly happy to discharge people out into the care of these people with no support or inclusion in what they were expected to do for that individual when discharged back into their care, but they weren't allowed to be involved in the process because of things like privacy agreement. We have policies that inhibit connection. Our funding doesn't promote connection. Funding is all around activity. For all the activity you do, the volume, you get dollars that equal that. That's my very elementary understanding of ABF. There isn't any funding there for what was the quality of time that you spent with individuals. There's no value placed on that kind of activity. We've got to remember as well that our feedback mechanisms that we traditionally use promote and perpetuate power differentials. I once provided some feedback to a local hospital having had to use the ED, and the feedback was submitted online. I then maybe got an automated response. I then got a phone call maybe about 2 weeks later from someone who had investigated the claim, hadn't spoken to me, but had investigated the claim, had investigated with the staff member involved, and had decided that yes, X and Y had happened, but here are the reasons why, and am I now satisfied? There was a really missed opportunity there for me to connect with that registrar and explain why I'd had the experience that I had and why my feedback was what it was, a real missed opportunity. So we need to also recognise that we do have mechanisms that can promote a culture of blame and retribution as well. We look at things like our root cause analysis process when there are critical events or deaths in care. And the whole purpose of that is to get to the bottom of it and find out who had a role to play, what had a role to play. And with that, it just smells like blame. It smells like fear. There's no wording around the process of what can we learn from this? What do we want to do better? How can we understand how this happened? do the people that had a role to play in it need some support, as well as the people whose family was impacted might need some support. I'm really nervous about this, and this as well as a reflection of that idea of staff not wanting to engage in feedback. Even kind of pointing out some of these things that I'm doing here is making me feel a little bit nervous and sweaty, as though I'm going against the agreement. But I think it's really valuable to just say what I've observed and what I've heard. So what do all people also need? And I think here we need to talk about the fact that people need courage. We can't necessarily shift the entire system as individuals, but we can look at one part of it and make a commitment to shift that. And sometimes that first step might be you're going to make a commitment to yourself to do things a little bit differently. And that might mean in your own little space that you challenge the power hierarchy that resides within models of feedback. And you might say, even though process says this, I'm actually going to call, or I'm actually going to have a Teams video link, or I'm going to bring the person in face to face, and we're actually going to take some time to connect and get to know one another a bit before we even look at the problem at hand or the feedback that they're coming to us with. I invite people to, as has already been mentioned, remember your origin story. You came into health because you wanted to care for people. You wanted to make a difference, presumably. You wanted to go away feeling like, yeah, you turned someone's world around in that moment, in that hour, in that day. And one way of finding out whether you are actually doing that or how you can do that better is connecting, is having conversation, is relating, is understanding. And when you talk to people, it's a different type of feedback to what you get from your manager, or you get from the system, or you get from a survey. It's something that you can kind of unpack together and find out more and learn from. I really love that idea. And that, I guess, is that idea of shifting completely from transactional to relational. It's saying, there is power in two-way conversation where we both bring courage, we both bring open dialogue, and we're real. We both recognize that people get hurt often in the context of a relationship, which in this case is often clinician patient, system patient, administrators patient. So conversely, people can heal in the context of that relationship. So in a sense, the mechanism and the process of feedback is in itself a mutual kind of healthcare. Maybe that's a big reach, but that resonates with me. I think when we get together and we listen to one another and we listen to one another's perspectives, we are able to build knowledge, understanding, and capability with consumers and our communities. They don't know what they don't know. And if we keep our systems as closely guarded as we do, and why we do the things we do, will forever remain a mystery, and people will fill in the blanks with whatever story they come up with. So we actually have an opportunity to kind of build capability in the community and knowledge and understanding around what we do and why we do it. I think also under courage, people need to have the ability to self-reflect and have a strong stomach. I got sober through going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and step 10 of Alcoholics Anonymous is continue to take personal inventory, and when you are wrong, promptly admit it. Now that is a significant enough action identified by this, amazing fellowship that will help a person stay sober and stay in recovery. So to me, it feels like, how can a system stay on track and in recovery? Then by doing the same thing, continue to take inventory, seek feedback, seek ideas and thinking, and when we're wrong, promptly admit it. There is such power in accountability, but I don't see that a lot. I see fear of accountability, I see shame attached to accountability. And I think they are lies we're telling ourselves. Accountability builds trust, it builds confidence in us, and accountability promotes collective healing. I totally think that. So I think I'm going to wind up now, but I think what we also need to recognise is if we have courage and meet people as they come to us with that level of courage when they want to give feedback, we have opportunities abound. We have opportunities to learn. We have opportunities to design solutions to problems together. We have opportunities to be really collaborative and get to the bottom of issues that we've often cycled through for decades and thrown different solutions at that have never stuck. Bringing feedback into that can help, you know, bust through that change fatigue that staff often feel. And finally, I think I'd like to close with this, that individuals, as we go forward, trying to be the change we want to see in the world, and we want to be courageous and we attempt that, we got to recognise that we don't need to shoulder the responsibility of all the things wrong with the system. Then it's not our responsibility to shoulder. And just by listening to feedback and inviting feedback is not an admission that we are somehow responsible for everything that's going wrong. We're not saying that. We need to have some safety in ourselves with that and give the responsibility back to the people who it actually belongs to. And that endeth the sermon from me. Thank you, everyone, for having me.
Liz, you bring goosebumps. I don't know if you've seen that throughout your presentation, but if you haven't, I encourage you to go through the comments and the reactions. You've clearly really touched a lot of people in this time and through what you were sharing, and just to say thank you for your courage in what you did just share with us. That's not easy, and I think you've touched on issues that really resonate with a lot of our audience, and it's great to see for all of you joining us, you to be so supportive and create this safe space for these ideas to be shared. So thank you so much, Liz. Now, Keith, I could see your hand up, and so I just want to make sure you're able to ask your question or make your comment. Please do go ahead.
Thank you. I heartily concur with Liz and her statements. As a representative, as a consumer, I heartily agree with what she said with the hurdles that are there. Really are hurdles, and they shouldn't be. A lot of it is from systemic things like doctors and staff and things like that. I also like courage. To me, that was a terrific thing, you know, to be able to have your say, and if you've made a mistake, put your hand up and take ownership of it. And in these days, it's something that doesn't happen anymore. Everyone likes to pass it on to somebody else. Sometimes it's a forward pass, unfortunately, but you get that on a big job. And importantly, or most importantly, I think, is communication. Without communication, mate, it works between clinician and patient, between staff and management, and all the way down. And I also believe that the idea of we have patient-centered care, which is the people are supposed, sorry, the clinicians are supposed to listen to what the carers have to say about what's going on with their patient, because they know what it is. If they come in, if a child comes in with a high temperature, and it gets hoo-ha'd out of the place because the child did have a high temperature and they just laughed it off, and you know, take some Bex and have a lie down, But it needs to go further than that. Yeah, there's one just recently where that sort of thing happened, and someone had scarlet fever. So that's a big thing. Yeah, you need to listen to what the carers are telling you. Thank you very much for wasting all your time, mate. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith, and thank you again, Liz, for honestly and courageously sharing with us your message, which has resonated with many, and there's many that support your message as well. And having the right leadership, culture, governance that allows staff to be proactively engaged can also be some enablers, and we'll be discussing some of that in the later session. So enablers that allow staff to have the courage and that fearless accountability that you referred to as well, allowing people the permission and the courage. Thank you again, and any other questions, please do share questions, comments in the chat, and all of the recordings will be available after as well. And a lot of what has been shared we will use in the last session as we reflect and consult. I'd like to introduce our next presenter, Clare Mullins. Clare serves as the Executive Director at the Health Consumers Council in WA. She plays a crucial role in advocating for consumer rights in healthcare. She is very well known for her efforts to ensure consumer voices are heard and acted upon within the healthcare system. Her leadership emphasises the importance of proactive outreach to engage consumers effectively. Clare's approach is characterised by a strong commitment to listen to and act on feedback from health service users, fostering an environment of mutual respect and continuous improvement in healthcare services. Clare this evening will address the crucial question, what do consumers want from a feedback framework? Her insights will focus on the essential elements that make feedback mechanisms successful, emphasising responsiveness and the practical impact on healthcare quality and consumer satisfaction. With that, I welcome Clare. Thanks, Clare.
Thank you, Tina. And thank you to Liz too. I really enjoyed that presentation. It was both very grounding and very inspiring, so thank you. And hello to a few of the other people who are joining today from Western Australia. So yes, as Tina said, my name's Clare Mullen. I'm the Executive Director at Health Consumers Council in Western Australia. I do have some slides, so I will share that now. And hope that I can continue to see you. Yes, there we are. If by chance you're not seeing my slides, if one of the team could, let me know, that would be good. They're
all visible, Clare. Good to go.
Fantastic, thank you. As is often the case, I've got about 4 hours of content that I'm going to try and squeeze into 10 minutes with a Scottish accent. So I do hope, but what I've done is I have organised it so that the key points I hopefully come across. So very briefly, I'm going to touch on Health Consumers Council for people who might not know about us, touch on why feedback matters, and then some important resources. So if you don't listen to anything else or you don't hear anything else, this is the point I really kind of wanted to get across under the heading of what is it that consumers want from a feedback framework. And in absolute extreme summary, consumers want it to be co-designed, they want it to be easy to use, but more than anything else, they want it to result in change, either for themselves or for others who follow them. And I will expand on this a little bit more as we go along. So very briefly about Health Consumers Council, we are the state peak health consumer organisation in Western Australia. We also have a partner organisation, Consumers of Mental Health WA, who are the peak for mental health consumers. We celebrate 30 years this year. And we have just redone our strategic plan, and our main purpose is to amplify and champion the voices of health consumers so that they can drive positive outcomes. And that's a really important part. As I said, this isn't just about being heard, but it's also about making change. But before I get into a little bit more about what the feedback structures are, I guess what's been top of mind for me in the last couple of weeks is, you know, what is health? So what is this business that we are all part of? And for many of us, you know, we kind of are immersed in it as our jobs and our lives. And this is an image from, which I've seen in various places. It's in the West Australian Aboriginal Health and Wellbeing Strategy. It's the Dance of Life, which is an image by Helen Milroy. I've included a link there where you can access more information on it. But the reason I wanted to draw attention to it is that I think when we think about a Western healthcare system, we do okay on physical health and okay on mental health, noting that for some people we don't do okay at all. But we don't really make an awful lot of space for any of the other aspects, which, while these are billed as the pillars of Indigenous concepts of health, I very much see what I want from my health reflected in these models. So, you know, people, in addition to physical and psychological health, there's also our social health, there's health of our relationships, the health of our community. There's the cultural aspects of our lives, which for many of us is a rich part of our experience, and the spiritual aspects. And I want to acknowledge that I'm joining today from Wajak Noongar Buja. It's been a real privilege to me to find myself on this part of the planet that has such a strong and enduring connection to land and country, and has given me an avenue for me to explore some of these other aspects of my health. So I guess I wanted to put that front of mind when we're thinking about a healthcare feedback system. I guess I'm interested in exploring, building on what Liz was saying about moving from transactional to relational. For me, the relational aspects pick up many of these things. And we often hear the word person-centred healthcare is used a lot. And what I observe is that we're decent enough at person-centred healthcare in that we pay attention to the person in front of us, noting that that is not everybody's experience, but for many people, you get paid attention to there in the moment. But what it's harder for, I think, our westernized medical systems to do is to really acknowledge the whole of a person's life and experience. And that is what I regularly hear from many consumers in various walks of life. So just again, I won't go through every part of this, but this is what we hear that people want from healthcare. They want their rights to be upheld, they want it to be joined up, they want to feel included in that, again, going back to what Liz said about the relational aspects and the compassion. These days we're moving much more towards it being digitally enabled, but we also want healthy environments where it's easier to be healthy. And I think many of us would like to be able to take safe, high quality care as a given. But I've shared on the screen, and I won't read every word, I will share the slides afterwards. These are some quotes that we received from consumers in Western Australia when we asked people about what they thought safety and quality was. There's a couple of things there. My auntie's disability meant she couldn't feed herself, and nobody would do it for her. Once my uncle, who was helping her get food, was held up and could only arrive really late, which resulted in her auntie not being fed. When my son transitioned services from paediatric to adult, he did that. He was treated at the paediatric service until he was about 15, 16. But when they transitioned to adult services, it took 2 years to get somebody to listen to the consumer when they kept asking, but who's looking after his heart? Because for that particular condition, paying attention to cardiovascular health was really important. And I guess what I wanted to do in showing this is the reality of some people's experience when, you know, the moment might be, well, please give feedback, but actually people may not have the time or attention to seek out how to give feedback. I also wanted just to bring into our awareness that the world of working with consumers and community members is changing, and it's changing quite quickly. So at the top, we've got our Mental Health Commission's framework for engaging with consumers. And what you can see along the bottom of that is doing to, doing for, doing with, and doing by. And we're seeing a really welcome move to more and more, as exemplified there by Liz's, the various experiences that Liz has had of co-production and citizen-led activities. Consumers are increasingly being understood to have a real value as critical frames. And again, as Liz said, people walk with a foot in both camps. Consumer representatives and consumer advocates have a really good understanding of the system and a really good understanding of consumer and community needs and interests. So they act as that kind of, you know, that agent that can move between those two worlds. And I want to recommend this book to anyone who hasn't come across it yet, Rebel Health, a field guide to the patient-led revolution in medical care. We held a book club event with the author just last week. And she really makes a strong case for the importance and power of peer roles in all aspects of health. We do it very well in mental health and alcohol and other drugs, but we have a lot to learn in the physical health space and those other aspects of health that I talked about earlier. And I guess, again, I think that it's important to keep these aspects in mind when we think about what a feedback framework could look like. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is that very often I think people do have a role in mind. When I speak to many people, I suspect possibly not the people on the call today, in the health system, I'm sure that people think of consumers in that bottom right-hand quadrant, which is as service users. But we're increasingly seeing consumers on boards. 2 or 3 of our health service boards, we only have 5, have lead help consumers, people who are grounded in the consumer community as board members. We have people collecting data, collecting feedback from other consumers. We've got people making sense of the data, reviewing complaint letters that are going out from the health service just to make sure that they meet the expectations that a consumer might have. So there are way more roles where consumers themselves can have a role as agents in that feedback system. So to expand a little bit on what I said, so the issue of feedback frameworks being co-designed, the really important thing is capturing what matters. We're seeing a lot more talk at the moment about patient-reported experience measures and patient-reported outcome measures, PREMs and PROMs. Thanks, Keith. But I think that what we're not yet really seeing is patient-designed outcome measures. What we're seeing is often measures which either clinicians or academics have decided are important to be collected, and then that information is gathered from consumers or patients. Whereas I think there's a lot more to be done in the space of co-designing A, the questions to be asked, and B, the process to be used, and also to give people confidence that consumers will also be reviewing the feedback, because as we know, a consumer lens can often be very different from a lens of a staff member. People want to have mechanisms that are easy to use. It's great to be able to say to people, you can jump online, it's anonymous, and if that doesn't work for you, then you can phone. But actually, what we heard when we asked people about how easy it is or otherwise to give feedback or make a complaint, one of the biggest things that people said is, I didn't know I could. Another big thing that people said is, particularly where they've had a less than positive experience, why, if I was treated so poorly by the health service in the first place, why would I have any confidence that they're going to take my complaint seriously? And again, that's one of the reasons that in WA we're such big fans of the Care Opinion platform, because when it's submitted via a public forum like that, then there is at least, if you like, an audit trail that says, I told my story, you can't say you didn't know. It also means that that feedback is available for when, you know, journalists contact us and others about other stories that are happening. We can say to them, look for the good news stories on Care Opinion, and you will also see some of the other pieces of feedback that people are giving. But like I say, overwhelmingly, I've worked in my role at Health Consumers Council for 6 years. I've spoken in that time to hundreds of consumers, many of whom have been involved for decades in this work. And I'd say the biggest thing of all they say is they want to know that their feedback results in change. Ideally, they would like it for themselves, you know, if somebody's in the midst of an incident. So if you think back to that person whose auntie couldn't get their food because no one was available to feed them, that person really would like to know that if they said that to a staff member, that would be fixed. Not that they would have to be talking about it after the event, but rather about saying, oh, you know, I raised it and it got fixed right away. But for also that other people have, very many people do go to the effort of providing feedback because they don't want what happened to them to happen to anyone else. And I have to say that's one of the things that I think is a big conversation to be having in Australia, is how do we use these individual stories to really transform the system and the culture, that we end up with a different system. That I know from my conversations with hundreds of staff that many of them want something quite different than is also possible, for example, as Liz said, within the constraints of activity-based funding, for example. Just some of the things that a consumer needs to invest in if they are trying to give feedback or make a complaint. So they have to have the time. They may have to have the mental energy and the willingness, perhaps, to, if it's a difficult story, to share a difficult story again and risk the impact that that has on their own mental well-being. They may be able to draw, get advice from other consumers, peers perhaps, who've been through it before. They would need to have internet or data and phone access, which is not a given for very many people in our community. And one of the things they can draw on, obviously, are consumer advocacy organisations. Now, I'm reaching the end. The Care Opinion team will be pleased to know, but I've just got a couple more things. People here, I'm sure, will know about the importance of advocacy. And again, we heard Liz talk about it so very well. But just to recap, advocacy is an action or series of actions that assist individuals or groups to achieve and maintain their rights. And as an advocate, we can walk behind you, beside you, or in front of you, depending on the type and level of support that you, as a person seeking advocacy, may want. In Western Australia, we are very fortunate to be one of the only state peak health consumer organisations that is actually funded to deliver individual advocacy services. And I have to say, I think that's an outrage. I think this is something that should be available to all consumers across Australia. I think to have a clinical governance system that says having a complaint mechanism is enough, without recognising that to navigate that complaint mechanism, even with the wonderful offering that is Care Opinion, is unrealistic and disempowering. And even in Western Australia, we only have 2.6 FTE for the whole of the state and for every health service except involuntary mental health. There are a number of consumer organisations across the country, but similarly, a lack of funding means that our efforts are constrained. And sometimes I wonder if that is the system working exactly as it's designed to do. Because I do think that with more investment in stronger consumer voices, I work at Health Consumers Council because I know that the next wave of transformation is going to be consumer-led, and a consumer feedback framework is a significant part of that. And so, just as a reminder of the main point, co-designed, capturing the information that matters to people, collected and reviewed by peers, that it can be done in the moment so things don't have to become complaints, but also that it is easy to do after the fact, and that people can have confidence that the time invested in sharing their story will result in change. Either if they've had a negative experience, that people will be listening. And again, that's why Care Opinion is so great, because you know that it's getting to senior people, but also that where positive things have happened, that you know that the staff involved may get a small lift from knowing that they've made a difference to somebody's experience. And that's me.
Claire, I cannot tell you how much I sit here cheering when I hear you speak so often, because you're exactly right. A lot of the issues you raise, but also what consumers need, it does need to be made easier to understand the complaints landscape, to know that you can make a complaint, that empowerment, that information. I think there's a lot of space for communication in this area. But as much as anything, yeah, we do need to have that framework to enable this. So I'm so pleased you've come on board, and I appreciate your what you said there. So we don't have questions come through that I've seen, but again, keep posting those comments, because there's certainly conversations happening. And if you'd like to take a moment to speak, please do ask a question as you will.
And great to be followed by another Westerner
There are no questions, but lots of
No
comments
problem at all.
for you to have a look at there, Claire. And thank you so much for your enlightening presentation on what consumers want. I think the elements and the different areas that you've covered in your presentation will surely keep in mind as we consult in the last session, and for the working group to also consider as they co-design that new governance framework for consumer relational feedback. And really good that you've highlighted we are seeing glimmerings of co-design or co-creation with consumers, being involved in co-production of prems and proms, but it's very early stages, very nascent, as you've highlighted. And I'm pleased to say we have had a small experience with having consumers actually involved in reviewing feedback of prems and proms. So having critical friends groups, a group of consumers serving with the care team to review the consumer feedback report, and using that and being involved in co-designing the continuous quality improvement activities or initiatives. So a little bit of learning, but much work for us to do in that space.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you. Okay, it now gives me great delight to introduce our next speaker, Neil Cowan. He's an Executive Director of the Armadale Kalamunda Group, and Neil has been pivotal in steering the Armadale Kalamunda Group towards excellence in patient care and service. He consistently highlights the importance of kindness and respect in patient care. He is an advocate for integrating these values into everyday healthcare practices, ensuring that both staff and patients experience a supportive and caring environment. His numerous responses to feedback on care opinion, Neil is engaged with these in an operational aspect, and he takes the time to address patient feedback directly, which showcases his dedication to improving service quality and patient satisfaction. Neil's leadership truly embodies a commitment to healthcare excellence and community engagement, and his session will undoubtedly provide valuable insights into effective healthcare management and patient care. Welcome and thank you, Neil.
Goodness, I hope I can follow that up with the presentation. Thank you for such a kind introduction. I'll just see if I can work with technology. Right, hopefully you can all see the presentation, and can you hear me?
Yes, and yes, thank you, Neil.
Wonderful, right. So I've tried to lighten things up with a few emojis through the presentation as well. Just got to work out how to click through it now. Right. So I'd like to start with the acknowledgement. Nija nunga buja, nglak wajak mort nunga buja ana. Nglak nuna brija, kora nija bordawan. I acknowledge the Wajak people have a continuing spiritual and cultural connection to this land, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and future. We're here in Perth, and you can see the beautiful Derbyl Yerrigan in front of you. Some of you might know it as the Swan River. This is an amazing place to live and an amazing place to work, and I'm grateful every day for being here. Tina spoke about appreciation, and so hopefully you'll get a sense of that as we go through the presentation. So, really, why should you care? Care opinion is another thing to deal with. Everyone's super busy, emails, other people's problems, dealing with meetings, trying to get things done, and in your inbox pops another care opinion. First thing, are you thinking, oh, I never get compliments? Well, we've already heard from James that 40% of care opinions are actually praise. So it's always worth thinking about how you might respond when you click on that link. You also might be thinking, oh, these are subjective responses. It's all one side of one story. But these people are telling you how things really are so that you can respond to them. You can learn for improvement through care opinion. You can deliver a better consumer experience through care opinion. And you can enhance your reputation as an organisation through care opinion. We've heard from Linda that you can respond well to stories, and Liz has told us to have courage. And hopefully as you go through the responses I've got next, you'll see that displayed. So Armadale Kalamunda Group has 3 sites in the southeast of Perth, and I've got 4 examples to go through. Those 4 examples are all from Armadale Health Service, which is a 320-bed general hospital. And we've got a little bit of everything here, so it's just like the perfect bowl of porridge. So I'll give you a moment just to read through this care opinion before we talk about compassion. I thought I'd also put in there, if you haven't seen it, just the way these are displayed on the website to give you an idea both of how criticality works and how many people are actually looking at the feedback too. And I felt pretty broken when I read So Broken's care opinion. And hopefully you can see how with time, and it took time to create the response and make sure it was sent in a timely manner, that compassion was shown to So Broken. Some of these responses are really difficult to read, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't respond always with compassion, because someone's going through their story. So that's the C of care, compassion. Accountability, that's the A. So we've heard about accountability discussed through this forum already today. And I think it's really important that we're honest in our responses, and you can see the honesty in the response here. You can see the accountability in the response here. And I hope you can see this is me saying how things really are, and more importantly, what we're doing about it. Again, a consumer clearly going through a tough time, but also raising some really valid opinions which needed to be addressed. So that's the A, accountability. And then respect. So this is a rather recent one, and actually I spoke to Rebecca about this. So this is 2 responses from family members. And unfortunately, we discharged their relative at 1 a.m. in the morning to a care home. And I read these in the morning and I was absolutely distraught. And so, of course, I asked the team and we found out who it was. And as James has noted in his feed, one of the key aspects of care opinion is about anonymity. So despite every bone in my body wanting to contact directly and apologise, we didn't do that. So we showed respect to the responses. They are both different. And you can see all told, that's another 300 people who read about that. And nobody wants their family member discharged at 1 a.m. That's the R, respect. So on to the E, empathy. So taking time to read through the care opinion story, you can see how not only was an issue raised here for the partner, but also they were going through their own journey and picking up on things like that and taking time to make sure they're covered in your care opinion response really does display empathy. This is not easy, it takes time. You need to make sure when you're reviewing the responses, you're doing them when you've got the time. This is not something that can be rushed. If you sat one in particular, nearly 400 readings. But I know what many of you are thinking. Yeah, but has any of this actually made a real difference? So firstly, I'd like to explain an acronym. So I've worked in the NHS and I've worked here in WA Health. And many of you might know what the NPS is. It's the Net Promoter Score. So it's how patients respond, and it's quite a critical score for negative feedback. So the way it works, if you can get up to a score of 70 out of 100, that's considered world class, and it's really difficult to achieve. And so one of the ways we review what our consumers really think about care is we keep a really good eye on the NPS score and the feedback. So I'm going to go through the scores we had as of yesterday for May. So yesterday for May, our inpatient NPS was 83. Our outpatient NPS was 76. And our emergency department NPS was 56. For those of you that are looking after emergency departments or indeed have attended them as yourself or with family members, it's really hard to get everything right in an emergency department 24/7. So here at Armadale Kalamunda Group, we're really proud to have got to 56, but recognise that we've got a lot more to do. And we've seen some other significant benefits too from the way we engage with our consumers and learn for improvement. So we've currently only got 2 open complaints. It was easily over 20 historically. And for those of you that are running complex services, to get down to 2 open complaints is extremely difficult to achieve. And we are still responding to the formal complaints we get in. So that means we've got a lot more time now because we've got a lot less complaints to deal with, formal ones. And you've heard a lot from other people about the ripple effect of this. So we've now got at least 100 log compliments per month. It was 140 last month, and we weren't getting those. So we've seen this benefit in the staff because, of course, they're living and breathing this every day. So they're sharing more positively, and it's been wonderful to see that. So I think absolutely I can say that caring has really made a difference at Armadale Kalamunda Group. Like all things, it's not just one thing. I'd particularly like to thank Sarah White, who's our Consumer Liaison Coordinator. She is online now. She does a phenomenal job in terms of making sure everyone's accountable for the care we deliver here at Armadale Kalamunda Group. We've also been doing a lot more work with lived experience, and Liz spoke about this, and we've got a lot more lived experience people coming online here because we've got more time to be able to recruit them. We heard James speak about the joy at work, and I'd just like to acknowledge that in relation to the compliments too. If people are happy at work, they're more likely to gain and attain compliments. And Tina spoke earlier on about fostering real learning and change, and I think that's what we've been able to deliver here at Armadale Kalamunda Group with all of these changes. So what would I say? Well, firstly, I'd say thank you. Secondly, I'd like to say an enormous gratefulness to all the staff here at Armadale Kalamunda Group who take consumer feedback really seriously. And I'd personally like to say, just to spread the love and of course the accountability for delivering an excellent consumer experience. And I couldn't resist a little plug for some care opinion tricks you can get. So one of them you can probably see there is a visualization. So if you're on care opinion, actually go to visualization, you can create all these wonderful documents. This one is a word cloud of everything, for every word from every piece of Armadale Kalamunda Group care opinion. And I think it's a really nice way to end because the hospital's right in the middle. Happy to take any questions.
Neil, I knew there was a reason I was looking forward to your presentation. I think it's being, especially some of the examples of those responses to the stories that you posted, where you've got that accountability and also the information explaining exactly what you're going to do makes an enormous difference in this space. So I think that's been really powerful. We did have a question earlier asking if you were the person who wrote those responses. Is that something I noticed that you didn't include that, so I wasn't sure if you wanted to keep that private or share the author.
So yeah, I mean, look, they're pretty much all my words. So I've taken my face off of it because it's about the responses. It's not about me. Sarah's enormously helpful, but I think she'd probably tell you I'm very particular about these things, as are the people who are going through their experience. So yes, they're my words.
Beautiful, and you're right. There's so much. We do a lot of work in working with staff to support them to be able to respond, because one of the things we see, as Liz shared, is a fear, realistically, because we are working in a public domain, and so we can unpack that a little bit further. But I do want to really thank you, and I also will. Actually, we've got a question coming through about your thoughts of having profile pictures. So. For those of you unfamiliar with the workings of the Care Opinion site, when a person is on the platform as a member and has access to respond to stories, they can upload a profile picture so that when the response is posted, a little picture of them appears in there. So in Neil's presentation, there was an avatar instead of his photo, but generally that's, as he said, just drawing attention to himself. And so, yes, that was one of the questions. And we've got another hand raised, but if you can,
Sure. Yeah.
love to hear what you think.
Look, I'm a senior public officer, so it's right I'm publicly held to account, and I think that includes my image. So I think it's probably the right thing to do. So that's my views on that.
Thank you for that. Now, I did see a hand go up before, but I wasn't fast enough to see. Was that Liz, was it? Beautiful. Elizabeth, if you could, sorry. Oh, Dan, sorry, I have I wasn't quite hearing outside of my speakers there. Dan, did you have a question there?
Neil, my curiosity is, how long have you been in your role, and do you think your approach has been sort of ingrained into the cultural fabric of how your health service actually treats consumers and feedback?
Sure, really good question. So just under 2 years is the answer. And I've made quite a few changes to the way that we manage consumer feedback, our partnering with consumers, and how we respond to complaints. So one of the other things we've done is now our own Consumer Advisory Council review the complaint responses. And I initially was doing every single complaint response myself, and I think that's helped in terms of getting the right values-based response to all consumer feedback. And since Sarah's joined the organisation in particular, there's been much more accountability across all 3 sites with responding live to that feedback. And I think that's one of the key reasons we've seen this improvement in our NPS.
If I may ask one quick question, when it comes to writing the response, do you think there's a place for the teams, the frontline staff or department for whom the story is about, to have an opportunity to workshop out how they would look at responding and recognising time restrictions there?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Obviously, the key thing is to make sure it's triaged so that we respond appropriately and in a timely manner, and also to make sure it's consistent. So I think there's definitely a role as Care Opinion matures further in Australia to look at that approach. But I think at the moment, it's probably at the right level for each organisation.
Fantastic there. Oh, sorry.
Thanks very much. I think we've got some really great comments again for you, Neil. Please have a look at those and keep the questions and comments and emojis for Neil and others as well. Thank you for sharing your perspective as an executive director on why we should care about consumer feedback, and your approach is most commendable and very inspiring. Lots of pertinent points and takeaway messages for other policymakers and executives online, and also the working group who will be co-designing the governance framework. And thank you for sharing examples of the stories and highlighting the care framework. And so wonderful to see that it's making a difference. Well done to you and your team for your persistence and efforts in driving this change. I would now like to introduce a consumer story. It's Monica's story about her being a change agent, being an influencer within the health system, and Monica was not well enough to participate live. She had chemo this morning, so a video recording, an interview has been done featuring Monica with the care opinion manager, Beck. Monica's experience with cancer at a young age has propelled her to share her journey anonymously on Care Opinion, and her stories are not just personal reflections, but also real powerful tools for change in healthcare. And today you'll see that Monica will share why she chose to tell her story anonymously, what she hoped to achieve through this process, and the impact of seeing actual changes made in response to her feedback. And through her narrative, you'll gain insights into the transformative power of patient stories in shaping healthcare and services. I'll pass on to the team to share the video.
Okay, so I'd like to welcome everybody and also say a very warm welcome to Monica. So Monica is a storyteller on the Care Opinion platform, a patient, but she's so much more than that. And we wanted to take some time having a bit of a talk with Monica to get an idea of her experience with sharing feedback and what this has meant to her. So Monica, did you want to start by introducing yourself a little bit? So I understand you were recently diagnosed with cancer at just 27 years of age, and I'd love to hear about you as a person and what your experience was like around your diagnosis and communication around appointments.
Yeah, so my name is Monica, obviously. I found a lump in my neck in November last year. I'd been working full time, I'd previously been very healthy, active, had no other symptoms really other than a little bit of itching, which I thought maybe was allergy related. Had a couple of months worth of back and forth test results, not really understanding or knowing what it might be. And eventually in January, I elected to have an excisional biopsy just so we could actually get a good result. The way that usually works is that I had surgery and then I had a follow-up appointment, a week and then 2 weeks later, and your results usually come out at some point within that time. The way that it ended up going was the hospital or the clinic that was seeing me actually missed a few appointments with me. So I was told initially that I would get a call on a Tuesday, and that call never came. I followed up with them and they said, oh, our results clinics are on Thursdays and Fridays. So as you can probably imagine, knowing that it was probably going to be cancer was a little bit of a scary
Very
wait.
Stressful. Yeah. Very, very concerning.
And so eventually I actually got the pathology clinic to fax the results to my GP. My GP told me, this is a cancer diagnosis, but the hospital needs to sort out the referrals and things like that going forward. So I wait till Thursday for my scheduled appointment, and that gets missed. It was supposed to be a telehealth consult and they just never called. So we followed up later that day, and it was, oh no, your doctor's been called away to an emergency. They'll call you later on that day. Emergencies happen. Called back at the end of that day and still oh no, the doctor will probably end up calling you tomorrow. So we rung first thing the next morning saying, hey, just wanted to check, roughly what time that might be. And the staff were like, oh, well, we have no idea your appointment was missed, they didn't call you. So you start to get a bit worried that you've sort of dropped out of the system, and so they're like, don't worry, doctor will call you later. And then by the afternoon we sort of double checked again and it's like, no, the consultant will call you later. And I'd got a text message from them saying the consultant will call you. Never got called. So by Friday night, I'd found out a few days ago that I had cancer, had no idea what the stage was, had no idea how far it had spread. And it's one of those things where it could have been quite a small thing, but it could have been quite a major issue. And that was when I'd sort of decided, okay, I really I really just want to be heard at this point. I know that I need a referral and a PET scan, and I just need someone to do that referral. And heading into the weekend, because I was going through the public hospital system, I thought I'm not actually certain that this referral is going to come through until Monday, or maybe not even till the next Thursday when they had their next results clinic. So you start to get quite worried. Yeah.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So you chose to share your story about this experience on Care Opinion, so our website. Can I ask, what was it that influenced you to go through a more public feedback platform that was also anonymous?
I think in the initial stress and desperation of a diagnosis, you just want to be heard. I would say I'm generally a reasonably reserved person, but when you're sort of feeling desperate for healthcare, and especially in my case, I really didn't know if it was going to be life or death, how long you'd have to wait. You really want to turn to someone to tell your story and to be heard. But I think after a little bit of time, I got a call saying that my referrals were going through the hospital system. And I think once I knew things were underway with the referral system, I got to thinking about the experience that I'd had and how the way that this particular hospital clinic were running their results clinics. I sort of thought, well, if I've had my appointments missed and I had a start of the day appointment, how many other people have had appointments missed? How many other results maybe haven't come through because I got my result, days later, and then I got a call from the hospital days later, and then my referral progressed after that. I received a call a few days after my scheduled appointment from one of the junior doctors. She was very apologetic that the results had been missed and was going to progress my referral. But we actually ended up getting to talking, and she was telling me that a few months ago the clinics had changed the way they were running, and so the junior doctors who were on call were also expected to be the ones to read the results and call patients. And so it was very difficult for them, obviously, to manage emergencies as well as actually filtering results and calling patients, and especially if you have to deliver bad news, you need time to do that properly. With the combination of my own experience plus thinking, well, everyone who is going through this clinic might be experiencing this same level of waiting, maybe doctors constantly getting called away to emergencies, and then this junior doctor saying, well, this is the new system and we've tried to tell our consultants or our senior levels that it's not working. And I've had some experience as a medical technician in the medical system. I know how it works. Sometimes you need a patient to actually speak up for a change to happen. And so for all of those reasons, I ended up using Care Opinion.
It's really advocating for staff, isn't it, as well? And I think that sometimes not everybody understands that. I suppose patients don't always want something fixed just for themselves. So with your story, the story was posted and you've had more than one response from the service or an executive director of that particular health system. I'd love to understand, there was a bit of a dialogue going on. You made use of the ability to respond on the platform. Can you talk a little bit more about how you felt about the different responses? Because, there were different approaches in the response in what was being done. I'd love you to share what that was like for you as a person and obviously as a patient.
Yeah, so initially I had posted my story, the experience that I had with the clinics who pre-surgery were really excellent. And I wanted to be very clear that, some of the care that I'd received was really amazing. But the way that I had experienced, and it seemed that this junior doctor had experienced how the clinic was running, there really seemed to be some room for improvement. So initially, I just shared my story. I'd also gone through the patient outreach team, as I was sort of desperate to contact anyone. So he had some awareness of my situation, and in his first response to me, it was very sympathetic. Obviously the situation that I was going through is one that a lot of people have a lot of sympathy for, but he sort of said, "It's great that you're receiving care now, all the best." And I thought that doesn't really address some of the issues that I've actually brought up, in that this clinic seems to be running in a way that doesn't make sense. And you know, from what you've said, some of your doctors are getting very stressed about how this clinic is being run, how they're expected to deliver results. And so I ended up replying to him and saying, you know, "Thank you for the well wishes. It's great that my care is underway, but could you explain to me what you would like to do about this system? You know, we've identified an issue here. What can you do about it?" And again, the medical system, it works better if you can reach the executive level or consultant level. At the moment, it was just me as a patient talking to a junior doctor. There's not a lot of change that you can make, but the fact that you can actually reach someone on a higher level, that's how a system can be improved.
Yeah. So you felt once you'd posted that response back, just explaining you're really looking sort of, I suppose, more broadly for help for other patients, including the staff. You got a second response then, and in that one, we could see that a change was underway based on that. For you as a patient, and obviously you're going through a fairly challenging journey personally, but you've also got that insight into the medical field. What did it feel like to see that the results of something where you've shared it about yourself, initially out of desperation, but then looking a little bit into the bigger picture? What was that like for you to see that, you know, you've talked about reaching somebody more senior, but then to have influence change?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've gone through something that has been you know, a bit of a horrible experience for you, one of the things you want to do is try and make sure no one has to go through it exactly the same way as you, if you can improve something. So yeah, I got an email a few days after, I think it was, my story was posted, saying that a change has been made. And in the second response, he basically outlined the way they had restructured the clinic, that the on-call doctors were no longer the ones expected to deliver results. And that was an extremely empowering sort of feeling, because sort of had actually been able to make a change, and that really does kind of give a bit of hope, but also a little bit of closure, I think, to a situation that's very difficult to go through. And I was very aware, I guess, as well, that, you know, I'm a medical technician. Some of my support network are pharmacists and nurses, which is how I sort of found out about Care Opinion. And, you know, at the time, I had reasonably mild to no cancer symptoms. So I was in a position where I could respond to him. But if you had limited English, or if you had no idea how the medical system works, it would have been very difficult to actually respond, or really even just tell your story. So yeah, it was really amazing to actually see that a change had actually occurred.
No, and I understand that, and you're right, the feedback system isn't always particularly easy, and it's, I suppose, having those staff members being willing to come to the party and really engage with you and dig a little bit deeper, I suppose. It's obviously not always going to be the case that can happen on the public forum, but I think we often think about it as closing the loop on a situation where feedback's been provided. So sometimes I suppose there is that value for the patient, the person sharing the story, to have that closed and go, okay, it's come full circle, and we can see what that is, and walk away with that closure, which is fantastic. So what I wanted to ask then, there are times where people share a story and maybe a staff member needs to investigate, but that person chooses not to make contact. For them, that they've shared the story, that's a line under the sand. What would you say, if you can answer this, to a staff member to help them understand why would a person choose to do that? So you talked about desperation before. Do you have any thoughts about why a person would not want to reveal who they are or make that contact offline then?
Yeah, I think there's the main reason for that, and why I was initially wanting to remain anonymous, I think, is that many patients would feel like if they give poor feedback, if they say that a certain clinic or a certain staff member or staffing group, maybe has led to some sort of negative outcome for them, that they might somehow receive worse care going forward. So if you have these very real and genuine concerns about, whichever medical system you're using, that you want to improve the system, but you don't want to be seen as just someone who's whinging or complaining. And I think probably secondary to that, but along the same lines, is that, or another way that I've heard it phrased perhaps, is that someone's honesty might be curbed if they put their name to a complaint. So you may not actually be as honest as you need to be if you feel like you're going to receive worse care or some sort of negative repercussion from not telling the full truth.
Do you think it would make a difference if the person responding to the story put any information explaining why they want you to make contact or why it might be safe to do so? Do you think that would make a difference?
I think part of it is understanding or humanizing the system and not just making it just a polite safe response. It is easier to have a very honest conversation. So it may depend on what the exact issue is, but that may be something to make the patient feel safe, and they may be more willing to share their information and make it quicker and easier to actually have an outcome that's good for them.
No, that makes sense. I think I've got one final question I'd love to ask you, and what would you recommend to people who are thinking about sharing their story? They haven't taken that step to do so, be that about a really positive experience or yourself where there was a great interaction or maybe something wasn't quite so positive. What would you recommend to people who are just on that ledge deciding whether to step out?
I think if you have the opportunity to be anonymous, you've really got nothing to lose. So you may well have a change caused. You may well end up with better care. You may well just feel better after a little vent.
Yes.
And I think, let's be honest, no one likes receiving negative feedback. But if you can phrase the feedback you have as this is a problem with a system that you've got, rather than just attacking a person or anything like that.
Yes.
Then that is actually a good and positive way to, I guess, cause some change. But if you've got the opportunity to be anonymous, then you've not really got anything to lose. So why not?
That's very true. We often hear it said that all feedback is gold. Even if it might be thought of as negative, you look what you've done for the junior staff, those junior doctors and other patients. You've turned a situation around where it was, you started out quite distressed, and it's really, really come full circle. Monica, I want to thank you and also to wish you well. Your journey with your cancer is not over yet, but I really, really do wish you well, and thank you so much for your time, but also your courage in sharing your story and putting yourself out there like this. I think it's really valuable for those who are watching.
Thank you for the opportunity to share as well.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Beck, for doing that interview. And I also want to deeply thank Monica for generously sharing her personal story with us in the midst of treatment as well. It takes significant courage to open up about such challenging experiences, and Monica's strong desire to advocate for our staff and her drive to initiate meaningful change within our organisation is truly admirable. And her ability to draw something positive from her personal challenges is not only commendable but deeply inspiring. It is clear that Monica is dedicated to drawing something positive from her experiences and aiming to improve the healthcare system for other patients. This is a proactive approach that is required to have a movement of inspiring change, and really refreshing to see And I'm sure you will join me in thanking Monica for her contribution on this forum and for her bravery and commitment to positive change. And we wish her the very best in her full recovery as well. That concludes the first session, and I want to thank each and every one of you for your thoughtful engagement and insightful contributions thus far.